Cadillac. I've got the top roll back on a southern born and cloudy day, down a long stretch of highway. I know this day's gonna be my friend, long as I'm here, baby, in the flatlands.
Welcome to the Only One Shot Golf Podcast. My name's Jim Gallagher. I'll be your host today, and I have been since we started these podcasts. Appreciate you listening. Don't forget to subscribe to wherever you get your podcasts. Special thanks goes out to Steve Azar for allowing us to use his music. And you can find Steve at steveazar.com. Don't forget to get your copy of Only One Shot. That's available at Amazon, written by VJ Trolio. Well, we've promised you a daily diary from the Masters, here the 86 Masters, and today this podcast is based on Friday's round 2 at Augusta, which was a completely different day than it was in round 1. Guys that got off early, got off to a decent start, had some decent weather, but about 11 o'clock the wind started picking up. An entirely different golf course that really firmed up. Got the bite back into it, had some good winds up to 30-mile-an-hour gust, sustained 15-20, and I actually walked out right after our show that ended at 12, and I was astonished at how hard it was blowing and just how tough it was out there. And you truly forget when you haven't been on the property in 12 years how hilly it is and how the wind blows through the trees, and it was just so... I was glad I wasn't playing, to be honest, because it was just such a tough golf course and a big challenge, and we didn't see many under par rounds. I think it's 12, 13 players in the red, but Scotty Scheffler playing like world number one, phenomenal round today. Shane Lowry had a nice day. Schwartzel had a nice day. Sung J.M. is a couple over today, but he's hanging in there. Neiman hung in there. So Tiger Woods, that was the big story. How did Tiger do? And he shot 2 over after being over par quite a bit, over several bogeys early on, and fought it back. Struggled a little bit. I don't think he had the fairway till 7, but he does this. Tiger always does, and it lives up to his name, and he was tough out there today. But good to see him make the cut. He's tied for 19th, and still in the movie. No, not out of it by any means, and watch out for him. It's just going to be hard tomorrow, which will be round 3, and we're doing this today on Friday, and then Saturday's round is going to be tough because same kind of wind, same direction, but it's going to be really cold. It's going to be the low of 37, maybe the high of 50. So tough days ahead, and we'll keep you updated in our podcast tomorrow and recap what happens in day 3. But let's go back to day 2 at Golf Central live from a really cool day today. We had a couple really great guests, and I'd like to kind of recap that and go through some of the questions I had with the first one. 2-time winner Tom Watson came in, my captain from the 93 Ryder Cup, and he came in today and spent some time with us. It was great, and I asked him the first question. These guys are faced with some serious wind today, and I always felt like you, Tom, were one of the best wind players, and you never fought it, and you had to make adjustments. And what advice do you have for the people listening and out there, or just for these guys, to how they make adjustments? What were some of your keys to make those adjustments when it comes, especially around here where the wind swirls so much? And it was interesting to hear his answer and how he dealt with it. And he made a great statement that Augusta National was one of the most difficult courses to judge the wind. And he was talking about where our set is, and it's behind the practice area on the left side. And he said, guys, we're up here on this top of this hill, and the wind blowing out of the west is pretty consistent. That's the prevailing wind. We know what it's doing up here. There aren't trees where it swirls. He said, but then all of a sudden you get down an amen corner and down at the bottom of the golf course, and it barrels down through there and starts to swirl. And he says, you'll walk down there, and he said it's happened to him at 14. You feel like, it's going one direction, and you're coming, in the same basic direction on 17. It's going out the other direction, but the golf holes go the same direction. He said it was just so hard. But he said the toughest one, he said, and the most important hole to him was the 12th. And Jack Nicklaus talked to that. Was one of his 6 holes when we spoke to him on Thursday. And he said, everybody knows how famous the hole is and everything. But he said Ben Hogan told him, and this was interesting to hear him say, that he waited until the flag on 11 and 12 were going in the same direction. This doesn't happen very often. And they should, because they're basically going and designed in the same direction, maybe slightly right on 12. But he said he waited there, and that's when Hogan would pick the club. The last thing you want to do is to sit there and not commit to it. He said the thing he always did is just before or when he picked the club, he had to go with the wind direction that he felt that it was going in that direction and trust that. He said that was the key. And he said, 12th is the key hole. And he said it proved it the year Tiger won. And he said all four of those guys were up there tied for the lead or up there leading. He said they all hit it in the water and they all made double. He said, the key is to get it over the bunker, even over the green. Make 4. That's not a big deal, but making 5, making 6, your chances are over if you do that. And I thought that was a really some great advice. And next question we asked, we talked to Jack Nicklaus, and I asked Jack on Thursday what separates that elite player, and Jack said preparation. And I kind of asked, Tom, these guys are, preparing for different conditions in the beginning of the week. What was your prep coming into Augusta? And why are, you see a lot of these past champions having success. But what was yours like? And it's interesting to hear him say, Jack said he played 4 rounds and kept score the week before. Tom said he would prepare about a month in advance and try to hit snap hooks, controlled snap hooks. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. He kind of hit a little bit more of a fade, and it was more comfortable hitting that. And he said, but there's 2 drives on this golf course that a controlled snap hook works. He said that's 10 and 13. And he said what he would do if he would go home and practice, because he wasn't a real great shaper, as he said, from right to left. It was a lot more comfortable going to the right, left to right. So he'd practice that at home a month before. And, that was how he prepared for Augusta. And he said another thing is he saw yesterday in round 1 is a lot of balls coming up short on the greens. And we all noticed that the greens weren't as fast as we normally see it. They were softer because of the overnight rain. And then that made a huge difference. But he said like at 14, we'd see guys aim at 30, 40 feet thinking they're going to come back, but they didn't. But balls would land by the hole and stay there, he said. So you saw that, he said, but this is at about, I think we had him in there about 9:30. He said this golf course is going to firm up, the wind's going to blow and play completely different. Boy, was he right, because it was not the same as it was when we were first doing that. So he was dead on that, and it really, really was accurate. And that's why these guys are so good. That's why these champions and past champions are so good. They understand that. They see what's going on. They think their way. It's almost like they're programmed to get that done. Next thing we talked about was Rory and his quest for the Grand Slam, the career Grand Slam, and how he dealt with pressure, and how, I asked him, I said, how did you deal with pressure when you wanted something so badly? Because you were in this same situation. And he said, Jimmy, you forget about the Grand Slam. And I thought, And he paused and he said, unless it's the U.S. Open. And that's the one I wanted to win the most. And that's what he said. He said he wanted to win it badly because of his dad. And that's the tournament he wanted the most. And he said he played under the most pressure at the U.S. Open or the National Open, because it's the tournament he wanted to win the most. And he felt that pressure. So, and he kind of followed it up with saying, listen, we play as professional golfers under pressure all the time. That's normal. Maybe a little bit more in the majors, but there's a level of pressure, 3 levels of pressure. He said there's an upper level when you have it there and you can't you're suffocating yourself. Rigor mortis kicks in. You can't play because there's so much pressure. He said, but then there's the reverse of that at the bottom. There's a bottom level. He said, like he would hit a great shot, and then all of a sudden he'd start relaxing. And the next thing he did is he wasn't focused, and he'd hit a stupid shot. And he said, if I didn't keep up my intensity, all of a sudden I would relax, and I would get in trouble. So he said there's a top level, the bottom, obviously you want to stay in the middle. And it was interesting. He said, we all play under pressure, and we're all nervous, and there's different levels of it. But he said, I hear these players say, they're not nervous. That's not right. They're nervous, and they're just trying to pretend they're not. And I asked him, you mentioned nerves. How did you deal with nerves early on? Because you struggled. You lost some tournaments because of, maybe nerves. How'd you deal with it? And Tom said, he felt like he learned, and he had to learn how to win first. how to deal with the pressure, and then learn how to win, because he failed a lot. And he said, hey, I failed a bunch. And he said, the one thing about failing is I hated to fail. So he'd go to the practice, area, and he'd hit balls and hit balls and hit balls until he trusted his golf swing. And he said, I really couldn't deal with nerves until I truly trusted my golf swing. And he said, if you don't trust your golf swing, all of a sudden the wheels start turning and you're waiting for a bad shot to hit, and all of a sudden you're waiting for when you hit a bad shot at the wrong time. He said he finally developed the trust in his golf swing late in 1976. He said that's when he really, truly started trusting his golf swing. And that's when he learned to trust and play under the pressure. And that's when he played some of his best golf after that. And he dealt with the golf and the pressure at the same time, but you had to really trust your golf swing. And I thought that was great advice. And, the next question I asked, was there a moment, here at Augusta, there's so many that sticks out to you? And he goes, yeah, the moment I won both my Masters, they stand out. He said, but also the ones that I lost and I failed, like when he hit his ball left in the trees at 18 when Player won, or when he hit it in the right when Ian Woosnam won. He said, he had a lot of good chances to win the tournament, and it kind of boiled down to that 18th hole. That's the one that always got me. He said, but I got to tell you a story. He said, I don't remember the year, but one of the tournaments I finished 6 shots behind. And in 4 rounds, this is how I played the 15th hole. 2 times I had an 8-iron in it, 2. Once a 5-iron. And the other time I drove it right and had to chip it out. He said, I played the hole in 8, 7, 6, 5. And I went, wow. And Mark Rolfing chimed in and said, well, if you'd had 4 more rounds, you'd have been in great shape. And we all kind of busted out laughing. It was quite the moment. And it was great to have Tom in there. And we had a nice visit with Tom. And like I said, spent 20 minutes with him. And not long after that, Raymond Floyd came in, who was on my Ryder Cup team in '93 when Tom was captain. And, man, I'm just telling you, this has been such a fun week for me. First Jack Nicklaus, then Tom Watson, Raymond Floyd. We got a special guest for Saturday's show, and you'll have to tune in tomorrow on the podcast to find out, or on Golf Central, live from, we're on, I believe, from 9 to 12 on my shows in the morning on Eastern time, and they go another show to 3. So check out somewhere in there, you'll get to see a special guest, a former champion here at Augusta, and a multi-champion. So you'll love this next guest and how we talk and catch up with him. But back to Raymond, I asked him, I said, how did the relationship with Fred Couples? You and I were on the same team, Raymond, and you were always an inspiration to me, and you were a big part of Freddie Couples in his career. But when did that kind of take place? And he says, I never really told this story, but when Fred hit that shot at 18 in the Ryder Cup, and not a very good shot into 18, and we lost the Ryder Cup, had he tied the hole, we'd have won, and he really took that tough, and he took it upon himself that he lost that tournament, and it hung in there with him even after the ceremony, back at the hotel, and he's just sitting there crying and he's just beating himself up. And so I had to take him down to my room and get him away from everybody. And so I put my arm around him and said, buddy, hey, you're one of the 12. That shot didn't win or lose this tournament, so don't take it on your shoulders. But this will make you a great player someday. The Ryder Cup is going to make you a better player. That experience you had at 18, that last hole is going to make you a better player. And I think that's when they kind of became tight-knit, and that's what he said. He said it was kind of like when Arnold Palmer, who was kind of his mentor, took him under his wings. It was kind of like that with him. And if he had questions and or things that he might need, and he played a lot of practice rounds with Arnold, like he did with Freddie. And he said that's called mentorship. And he said, I've not been around the game as much lately, but I still hope that goes on today. Because in our era, that's what they did. And it was a lot about mentorship. And he's right, there still is that. You've got Tiger Woods and JT and that relationship. And there's several others out there that these veterans take care of these younger guys. So for Raymond, it does still exist. And I kind of asked him, did that happen early on or later on in your career when you started helping Freddie and other people? And And he said, no, I think it was more in the Ryder Cups, like with you on our Ryder Cup, and you guys would come up to me and ask me things, and I just, like I said, I hope it still happens, and it does. And we would go on and ask a few more questions, and we talked about his stare and how he's focused and how he would get in the zone. And I said, well, describe the zone. I've been in it, not as many as you, Raymond, and I kind of joked with him, if we could bottle it up, we'd be zillionaires. And he said that, the zone was like, his feeling was that his walk was lighter. It was softer. And that he could see clearly, and he could see and picture a shot. It was like watching a movie and seeing the shot and then pulling back the club. He said, that's what the zone in golf is, or at least it was for him. He said, I couldn't induce it, but when it was there, boy, I was focused. And I thought that was a great way of describing the zone. And, everybody always asks, how do you describe it? I thought it was a wonderful way to describe it. And the next question I asked was, these guys are going to be faced with some tough winds. And how could you test and judge the wind at Amen Corner? I mean, we asked Tom Watson similar to that. And he said, I said, like walking off 11 green. And he said, all of a sudden the wind would switch and change and go in the opposite direction. And he said, these guys are going to have that in round two in the windy conditions. And he said, he would always look at the wind direction and find out where it was going to be. Like, round two, it was out of the west overall, and that was your prevailing wind. He said, but when you got down in the corner, it would circle. And that was the tricky part. He said, but it was my focus. And he said, one night I was talking to Ben Hogan about it. And Ben said at the Champions Dinner, and he said that Ben would always look at the flag at 11 and see the way it blew at 11, and it was the reverse at 12. He said that was the effect of circling. That was so interesting to hear him say that, because as you remember earlier when I mentioned Tom Watson said he tried to get the direction in the same direction, the flags to go in the same direction. That's how much it swirls down there, because it rarely happens. But for Ben, he waited till that moment. He said, one day he was playing with Arnold, and the wind was out of the west like it is today, and I looked over at Arnold, and I said, hey, Ben told me to look at the flag at 11. And if it was blowing down the right, it was going downwind at 12. And he said, that's what Ben told me. Do you take any credence to that? He goes, absolutely right. So Arnold knew that even back then. That's why these champions have had so much success and continue to have success, is because they know these things that takes years to learn. There's only like 160 yards difference between the holes, basically going the same direction. But the swirling winds is what the toughest part about. Next question was, we talked to Rory, and we talked about Rory and his quest to win the career Grand Slam, that he was in that same kind of boat, and he wanted something so badly. And I said, how did you deal with that? He goes, I don't know. I got up, and I was a little bit nervous, but it took him a little bit of that nervous to kind of get him in focused and get his focus going. That nervousness helped him focus. He said, but I wasn't afraid to lose. Raymond said, I wasn't afraid to lose. And that was one of the things he said that helped me. He said when he would lose, he'd go in the media room and said, hey, I blew it. I didn't get it done. I didn't make the putts. It wasn't my time. He said, but, you see these guys get on the big stage and they can't handle losing. He said, my feeling was the more times I got myself in opportunities to win, the more likely I was going to win. So he said, Raymond said, I wasn't afraid of losing. And he said, that's just a big part of winning, not being afraid to lose. That was so epic. That was such a great answer to that question. And the last thing I asked him, he said, if there's all the memories and the thing he's most proud of in his career, what would it be? He said, Jim, I would say it's longevity. The ability to win in 4 different decades is something special. I've got all the Ryder Cups, I've got the majors, and that's all important. But the longevity was what he was most proud of, and as he should be. Raymond is one of the best, as was Tom. So it was a beautiful day for me. It's going to be a lot of fun to see day 3 and how these guys handle it and see how Tiger holds up. Cold temperatures, windy conditions. It's going to be survival. It's going to be brutal out there. So look forward to hearing or seeing everybody or listening to everybody out there and see how they think the golf course is played and watching them play. So appreciate y'all listening tonight. And we look forward to Getting back to you tomorrow, and we'll talk about day 3 and recap the 3rd round at the Masters. Until then, don't forget, whether life or golf, you may have only one shot. You got to make it count. See you tomorrow.